kind of the stop and go routine, slowing down for spectators at times, speeding up briefly through Hollywood. Again, that's where he reached about 100 miles per hour, zipping through the Cahuenga Pass into the San Fernando Valley, got off, I believe, in Studio City, and then back on the freeway towards the 10 freeway, back through downtown, and now here in East LA. Still has his hazard lights on. And while it was just speculation earlier, and I guess remains so now, it has to be the case that he must be exhausting through the remainder of his fuel tank. We don't know what he started with. We don't know how much fuel he has left, but law enforcement, as you can see, has endless amounts of fuel. They have endless amounts of units that can continue to hand this off to neighboring divisions, and we've seen that happen over the course of this pursuit. There have been a number of primary officers taking over the lead on this pursuit. There have been a number of different agencies assisting in this pursuit, including LA County Sheriff now, various jurisdictions within LAPD, as well as the California Highway Patrol, whom I presume is currently implementing that traffic break, which is why you don't see any cars zipping past him. So they are keeping the public at bay, and what we can see, while we can't say for sure what the fuel situation is, you can clearly see that his wheels are a little wobbly. They have run out of air after what appears to have been a successful spike attempt. At some point, the rubber is going to run out, and he will begin, it'll be metal on pavement, and you will start to see some sparking if he picks up any kind of speed whatsoever. So you see he's got his hazard lights on. He's turned his windshield wipers. No, the windshield wipers are also still on. And he is weaving around there. You can see him swerving slightly, kind of all over those lines. And just using every last drop of gas left. Just anybody's guess, really, as to where or how this is going to end. We all hope it ends peacefully, but the risk is always there, especially with somebody in this condition. Stand by. So we're getting some information now that does appear to indicate that there is some severe mental illness, which is not a surprise at all. Severe mental illness in play here behind the wheel of the silver Chevy Malibu. And that is thanks to a relative of the driver. So law enforcement has now finally made contact with a relative of the driver. They are trying to contact the driver behind the wheel, and they're trying to coax the driver into pulling over and giving up. So that all really makes sense when you consider what we've been observing here for the better part of 3 hours. Mentally unstable individual behind the wheel explains a lot of the dangerous driving that we saw early in this pursuit, explains the erratic behavior in the last couple of hours, despite the slow speeds, which have also been kind of all over the place and fluctuating as well. You can see that LAPD is now squarely behind him, as well as above him. They've got that night sun overhead. They've swapped out helicopters on multiple occasions, and they are just looking to be in the best position possible to safely get this guy off the road and get him the help that he needs. That is really the priority, as well as protecting all of the bystanders, of which there are few at this point. He basically has the freeway to himself, and hopefully in due time they will manage to get him in contact with his relatives, his family, and hopefully convince him to give it up. Yeah, well, that's, thank you. Yeah. Once again, as you follow along with us here, we're continuing eastbound on the 10 freeway, now approaching Atlantic Boulevard. Still a game of stop and go here as the driver behind the wheel of this silver Chevy Malibu continues to contemplate on how he wants to end the night here. You can see LAPD staying close behind him here. We have seen him on his phone at various points here, and on occasion coming to complete stops like this, although usually he transitions into a slow roll and then picks up speed and kind of goes through that routine over and over again. So this has been, again, going on for the better part of the last 2 hours that he's been on the freeway. The first hour he was mostly on surface streets in Inglewood. Again here, he's dealing with now some disabled wheels. The rubber starting to really come off of that front left wheel, and we understand, or could see clearly, that he's losing air in the rear as well. But that front left, that driver's side front tire is really shredding. So that's going to make it more and more difficult for him to maintain control of the vehicle and inhibit his ability to drive safely. So hopefully that plays into his decision making. Hopefully he'll decide to just bring it to a peaceful end, and it really would be in everybody's best interest at this point. But if there's any way to calm him down, that's what they're going to try and do, presumably to even put him in contact with his family, if that's a possibility. So that's one hope, if that's an option. And you could see he's continuing now to kind of wobble down the eastbound side of the freeway here, with about a half a dozen units at least still behind him. They have handed this off amongst each other, mostly within LAPD. CHP still assisting in this traffic tie-up. And much as we saw earlier on the 110 freeway, we're now seeing an extensive backup on the eastbound side of the 10 freeway. This backup now extends from Atlantic Boulevard all the way back to well before Eastern Avenue now. So it's growing steadily as the freeway fills up. As I look out the window here, really a steady backup of headlights in this direction coming from East LA, and actually as far back as almost the East LA interchange. So you can see that backup there. That is all due to the traffic break that has been created by law enforcement down there on the ground to keep the public at bay and keep those motorists safe. So it's very frustrating if you're stuck in that traffic, but obviously there's an important reason for it, and that reason is they want to get this person off the road and get him the help that he needs as soon as possible. Of course, we're now going on 3+ hours of this routine, so it's certainly getting old for everybody involved, but that doesn't take away from the danger that still lies behind the wheel. We just don't know what he's capable of. And again, it's worth reiterating, the early reports have been throughout this pursuit that he is believed to be armed. That front left wheel still struggling. The tire just barely hanging on. Once again, Chris Christie with you up in Air 7 HD as we continue to follow this slow speed pursuit down the 10 freeway, eastbound side of the 10 freeway. In the San Gabriel Valley now as we leave East LA and continue to follow this LAPD in pursuit of this individual behind the wheel of a silver Chevy Malibu. Was originally wanted by LAPD's gang unit in South LA. A number of other divisions been joining this pursuit since the beginning. 77th Division as well as Newton. Harbor Division at one point getting involved when he ended up on the freeway. And now for the better part of the last 3 hours, we have seen this turn from a high-speed pursuit to a slow-speed pursuit. He has really covered quite a bit of real estate throughout South LA, all the way down to the port of Long Beach and all the way up into the San Fernando Valley. And now again, we find ourselves heading east on the 10 freeway. CHP doing their best to keep everybody safe, shutting down the freeway, creating quite a traffic backup, I should say. But still, again, all for the purpose of keeping everybody safe. And there are indications that the driver behind the wheel may be mentally impaired. And so for that reason, amongst many others, including the fact that there has been widespread belief that he may be armed, they are treating this very gingerly. That's why you don't see any aggressive pit maneuvers. It looks like the go-ahead was given at some point to attempt a spike strip, which appears, if that was the case, which may have happened while we were refueling our helicopter, may have been effective. And now you could see the rubber, that tire coming off of that front left wheel at least. Also appears that the rear wheel is flat as well. So you've got two flat tires, one of which the tire is coming off. And that's going to make it very difficult if he decides to step on the gas as he has previously. At this point, he is continuing the slow speed charade, putting on quite a spectacle for a lot of folks who have come out, who have been watching this online, have desired to take a part in this moment and share this on their social media feeds. We've seen a number of people lining certain overpasses with their cell phones out. Certainly not encouraged, but nevertheless expected, especially here in the City of Angels. So we continue eastbound on the 10 freeway at a snail's pace, picking up speed ever so slightly once in a while, maybe 25, 30 miles per hour, and then he slows it back down to 5 or 10, occasionally coming to a complete stop. And it, as we always say, is only a matter of time, although there's no guarantee that it's going to be a short amount of time. Oh, we'll have to research that one. LAPD doing another handoff here, swapping out the primary units with additional units that are now joining the pursuit. We should have a total of about 4 units immediately behind him, and additional law enforcement blocking traffic and ready to partake in the felony stop when this does finally come to an end. In the meantime, as they regroup down there, we're going to continue to follow from up here. Looks like the helicopters may be swapping out as well. Appears to be a fuel swap. So a game of handoff here as we go on hour number 3. In fact, 3.5+ hours, which is amongst one of the longest pursuits that I've personally covered. Maybe not quite the longest yet, but certainly approaching one of the longest I can remember in a very long time. Again, 3.5+ hours at this point as we approach the bottom of the 10 o'clock hour. It's a tedious situation, but nonetheless a vital situation that they end safely. They don't want anybody to get hurt. They are trying to protect the public. They are trying to keep themselves safe and hopefully get this individual the help that he needs, which certainly appears to be the case. So again, traveling at about 15-20 miles per hour at a snail's pace past Walnut Grove Avenue. Incidentally, we are now in the Rosemead area of the San Gabriel Valley, continuing to gradually move eastbound. Passing another exit here, that is Walnut Grove, and still seeing units at some of the entrance ramps up ahead. So that trend is continuing, as well as the traffic break behind him. And the reason I keep bringing attention to that is that it is creating a traffic nightmare for folks trying to get home tonight. We've seen this on a number of different freeways now. We saw the extensive backup on the 110 Harbor Freeway. We saw it on the 101 freeway in Hollywood, and now we are seeing a major disruption on the 10 freeway here in Rosemead and in the San Gabriel Valley. A backup that extends all the way back to the East LA interchange. Copy, copy. Thank you. Well, look at this. It appears he's come to a stop once again, and LAPD under the impression that maybe this might have been it. You saw those doors pop open, ready to get into position and bring this to an end here, but they have not been doing that at every stop. So one has to wonder whether they may have information that he may be willing to pull over. We don't know that, but we do know there's a possibility that contact may have been made. We do understand that law enforcement is in touch with family. That appears to be the case. There is also information that this is a wanted burglary suspect. And as we've been reporting, there is a belief that he is armed with a weapon and has a history of weapons violations according to law enforcement traffic. So again, this cat and mouse game continuing down the eastbound side of the 10 freeway across various lanes here, stopping and going, continuing on again. The hope is that somebody can communicate with him and convince him to give up peacefully. But beyond that, we could say well, I should also mention there's also reports that we may be heading away from where this person lives, away from home. So we don't know where he intends on going, but it does appear he's traveling away from one of the possible residences that they believe he resides in. So again, a number of factors at play here. LAPD dealing with the information that they have, but there was definitely a sign there as he came to a stop a minute ago that maybe that might be an opportunity for them to bring this to an end. But what we're seeing here is the same pattern that we've been seeing all night. It's a stop and go situation where he kind of toys with the units behind him, comes to a complete stop at times, but then steps on the gas again. And this can continue indefinitely, quite frankly, until he runs out of gas. It's really up to the watch commander because there are other ways to handle this. There's a number of strategies and tactics that could be employed. We've seen a different strategy tonight, although one of them includes a spike strip, and that spike strip attempt appears to have been successful. The spike strip has the most effectiveness, though, when the driver is driving much faster. You could drive pretty slow on a flat tire, or two flat tires in this case, and at the speeds he's going, those flat tires aren't really much of a problem. But you could drive pretty slow for a long amount of time before this officially ends. So it's a wait and see game up here. It's much more frustrating for the people that are stuck in the traffic down below, and there are thousands currently stuck in traffic on the eastbound side of the 10 freeway. Officers opening their doors again, and as they do, you can see him inching forward again. I'm good. As the pattern continues, one has to wonder what other considerations they may be making, what other tactics they may be strategizing. We don't know what they are, but certainly they're contemplating other ways to bring this to an end at this point. There has to be a backup plan. They never operate without one, and this is not an exception. But for now, it is a wait-and-see game, and a game of hope that he thinks better of it or runs out of steam or the vehicle becomes disabled. Of course, the use of force is the last resort of any kind of force. I mean, they have already employed their spike strip, which was successful to a degree, but here we are 3.5 hours into this pursuit, and the amount of resources that have been poured into this are immense at this point, as well as the disruption to traffic, which has been going on for 3.5 hours. As I mentioned, we've seen thousands of people stuck in traffic due to this person's decisions tonight. Again, this is a wanted individual with a history of weapons violations reportedly. There are indications that he is a wanted burglary suspect. We understand that this was initiated by LAPD's gang units in South LA earlier this evening. There was a wild high-speed chase with some heart-stopping moments in the early hour of this pursuit throughout the streets of Inglewood. And look at that. Looks like a third flat tire. So we've now not only confirmed that the left tires are flat, but that front right tire is also flat. And even as he picked up speed there, you saw a couple of sparks fly off that rim. So he's starting to make metal here. He's running out of rubber, and he is still swerving and trying to maintain control of the vehicle. He loses it a little bit if he speeds up, and that's the goal of the spike strip. But he really isn't going very fast, and he's really, as I mentioned, just continuing a pattern of behavior, trying to antagonize these officers and drag them along here. Almost positive, although I can't say for certain, but almost positive that we are looking at an entirely new group of officers, with perhaps maybe the exception of one. But that handful of officers behind him, doubtful that many of them were with this chase 3.5 hours ago, although we can't say that with 100% certainty, although we can say that most of the units have been swapped out at this point. There have been several agencies assisting in this endeavor, as well as at least 3 helicopters that we're aware of. So, as I mentioned, lots of resources being poured into this pursuit. all for the safety of the public at large, as well as the safety of this person behind the wheel who may be mentally impaired. Hey there, Christina, you up? Yeah, the name is right. It probably is real. But in any event, what is the plan? I'm just curious what the plan is for 11. Are we sticking with it for the whole show? Cool. Just checking. Perfect. Appreciate it. Got that tire flapping. Again, more sparks coming from that front left wheel as he picks up a little more speed now. We'll go ahead. Let's throw up the speed tracker. It looks like he was pushing it a little bit there. Every time he does, you start to see he loses more rubber, and gradually he will lose more control, especially as the tires come all the way off here. So still seeing a pattern of erratic driving, erratic behavior. And now not two, but three flat tires. Both of the left tires as well as the front right tire, which we saw sparking just a few minutes ago. And you can see he is just continuing with the stop and go pattern that we've been describing. LAPD really, really close behind him. They're really closing in on him. And, you know, they're ready. I mean, these officers are ready, as they always are, but when you have a slow speed pursuit like this, they're extra ready. They have extra time to consider all of the factors involved here. They don't have to worry about any bystanders in this situation. Traffic, incidentally, is still open on the westbound side of the 10 freeway. However, eastbound traffic has been halted behind this pursuit. There's a traffic brake in place. to keep the public at bay behind this pursuit, and there are officers up ahead preventing folks from entering the freeway. That's a pattern we've seen on the 110 freeway as well as the 101, and now we're seeing it once again here on the 10 freeway, and that's something that's always preferable, but not always possible, depending on the manpower available and, of course, depending on the speed of the pursuit. Again, the speed of this pursuit is giving law enforcement every opportunity to come up with other contingencies, think of things that they might not be thinking about, and gather more information. And there are indications that there is a widespread belief now that the person behind the wheel is suffering from a mental impairment. And so they are treating him carefully, but there's also apparently a want for burglary. That is what we're hearing. That is the indication coming from the LAPD, is that this is a burglary suspect with a history of weapons violations, and there's widespread belief throughout the course of this pursuit that he is armed and dangerous. So with all of those factors in place, this is what we are left with. They are treating him very gingerly and presumably will continue to do so until he steps out of the vehicle at some point, hopefully peacefully. Thank you, appreciate that. You're the best. Sign said, "Fools gone wild. Fools gone wild." Once again, if you're joining us live on abc7.com and our ABC7 streaming apps, now is the time to remind you that we are preparing to go live on ABC7 with our 11 o'clock Eyewitness News broadcast coming up in just 7 minutes as we continue to follow this slow speed pursuit, now going on hour number 4. That's right, almost 4 hours of continuous coverage here, and no end in sight. I can't believe I'm even saying that, but really, we don't know how this one's going to end, and we can only hope at this point that it ends peacefully. But there are a number of terrifying factors. Despite the slow speeds here, we are dealing with a very unstable individual behind the wheel, somebody wanted for various charges on violent crimes, as well as the widespread belief now that he may very well be mentally impaired. And so you have law enforcement treating the situation very gingerly, and we have a major traffic situation that has developed over the course of the evening. Currently on the 10 freeway, eastbound side of the 10 freeway, all jammed up. As you head out of East LA, coming out of the East LA interchange, heading into the San Gabriel Valley, we are bumper to bumper as law enforcement has created a traffic break here in El Monte is where we are now, approaching the 605 freeway, and once again the vehicle coming to a complete stop here, waiting for law enforcement to open the doors. They pop the doors, he keeps on rolling. Once again, Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock, just 2 minutes away as we prepare for full coverage of this 4-hour marathon pursuit. This time here in El Monte. It started in South LA through Inglewood. We've been all over town, all the way down to San Pedro in the South Bay, hit the Port of Long Beach, back up the Harbor Freeway, up into Hollywood and the San Fernando Valley, and back down again. And again, you can see we are now in the San Gabriel Valley, eastbound on the 10 freeway, approaching the 605 freeway with an armed and dangerous suspect behind the wheel of that silver Chevy Malibu. LAPD, the lead agency in this pursuit. There has been what appears to be a successful spike strip attempt, and you can see both of the left tires and the front right tire are all flat. Now, it's not inhibiting the driving too much because of the slow speeds here, but nonetheless, it is creating for a very tedious process of getting this person off the road and getting him the help he needs, and of course, trying to do so while keeping everybody safe. Again, westbound side of the 10 freeway remains open. Eastbound side, all jammed up, down to a halt, a grinding halt from East LA all the way out here to El Monte. So a dramatic situation playing out on live TV here. We're going to continue to cover every second of it coming up right here on Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock. Don't you start. Shooting stars, remember? All right, here we go, here we go. We are in El Monte, 10 freeway at the 605. David, it has been one of the longest and one of the most bizarre police chases we have seen in some time. This all started shortly before 7 o'clock, and as you just expertly articulated, we have been all over town, all over LA County, from the South Bay all the way through South LA, downtown San Fernando Valley. We find ourselves now here past East LA in the San Gabriel Valley in El Monte on the eastbound side of the 10 freeway, approaching the 605. Now, as he has made his way from freeway to freeway, it has snarled traffic up all night long. Again, we're going on hour number 4 of these charades with the suspect behind the wheel believed to be armed and dangerous, and there is now widespread belief that he may be suffering from a mental impairment. And so they are treating this very gingerly. There are reports that he is wanted for burglary and has a history of weapons violations, and this was initiated earlier this evening by an LAPD gang unit. And that initial report also resulted in belief that he is armed with a gun at this moment. We don't know any of that for certain. All we have is the information that has been trickling through the police scanners here this evening, and it has been a long and tedious chase. Now, for a bulk of this pursuit, well, I should say in the first hour, it was a very wild and high-speed chase with a lot of heart-stopping moments, going through a lot of red lights, blasting through intersections, and really putting a lot of lives in danger. As we transitioned into the 8 o'clock hour, he eventually made his way onto the 110 freeway, and ever since then has been playing a game of cat and mouse. It's been a stop-and-go pattern where he toys with the police. He seems to be enjoying the attention. There is some indication, there is evidence that he is well aware of the attention-grabbing nature of this, especially as he comes up on various overpasses. There are now folks lining up at some points with signs and their cell phones taking pictures, looking for a viral moment. And they are that routine has been continuing for the better part of the last 3 hours in a very slow speed fashion. So the driving has been fairly composed. He's been able to maintain pretty decent control of the vehicle, but at some point between getting on the 101 freeway in Hollywood and then making his way through the San Fernando Valley and turning around back through downtown, there does appear to have been a successful spike strip attempt. And that's where we see those 2 flat tires on the driver's side, as well as a flat front tire on the passenger side. Now, as far as we could tell, he is the only person inside that car, only the driver that we know of. The passenger seat is empty, and we believe that the back seat is empty too, although we can't confirm that either. You can see the windows are up. They're pretty heavily tinted, but every time we get a glimpse through the driver's side window, we see somebody who is very agitated, very animated, and clearly in some sort of distress. Without too much speculation, there is information, though, that he may be suffering from a mental impairment, and there is an effort at this point right now. We can tell you it does appear they are looking for ways to contact this driver via family, who has reportedly been in touch with authorities. So you can see more spectators coming out. They're following this. We have messages coming in, quite frankly, from across the country, people who have been riveted to this pursuit all evening long. Again, we are going now well over 4 hours now, and we don't know how this is going to end. But as tedious as this is to watch, I think it's very important, David, to stress how dangerous this is despite the slow speeds. We've seen it get to some very dangerous points early on, and we just don't know how this is going to end. And that is the reason, while it's frustrating for some viewers, it is the reason LAPD is taking every precaution to treat this suspect very, very gingerly and not to agitate him too much. And hopefully this comes to a peaceful end in a safe way, and they can execute a felony stop and get this person the help he needs. But there are extraneous circumstances, not the least of which is the fact that he is believed to be armed and dangerous. David? Exactly right. And, we're seeing this pattern continue. And this has been going on literally since about 8 o'clock, where he kind of speeds up to maybe 40, 50 miles per hour at times, but then slows right back down to 10 or 20 miles per hour and continues the game of cat and mouse. And because of the slow speed, it's played into some other sideshows, if you will. Again, as you mentioned, there was somebody along the side of the road, obviously too much time on her hands in the middle of this pandemic, had time to make a sign and got on TV. Of course, there are other folks who are lining up on overpasses, on other streets. You saw right there people screaming at him, and it's just an only in LA situation, quite frankly, and not the least of which included a homeless encampment fire along the northbound side of the 10 freeway, which was cause for alarm. But he just kind of zipped by that, sped up a little bit, and we made our way past that situation. Then he made his way through downtown LA, which was an opportunity which we often see with some of the more savvy pursuit drivers, where they look for an opportunity to hide. He never did. He never did any of that. He just stayed on the 110 freeway, got off at the 101, and then he got on the 101 and did about 100 miles per hour through Hollywood. He zipped through Hollywood, made his way through the Cahuenga Pass, turned around at some point in there, struck that spike strip, and is now all the way back here and continuing the stop and go pattern. And it's clearly a tactic of his that he is enjoying to some degree, because every time he slows down, he's more often than not actually coming to a stop solely for the purpose, it appears, of getting LAPD to stop with him. Every time he does that, they pop open their doors, they prepare for the felony stop, and then he starts inching his way forward, going about 5 to 10 miles per hour. This can continue for quite some time. I can tell you right now there are a couple of units, possibly even the 2 units that you see right here, that are running low on fuel. It's not the first time we've seen that in the course of this pursuit, and they are swapping out units as we speak. So you've got a package of 4 units in pursuit here. There is another team that's basically handling the traffic situation. I believe those are made up of mostly CHP officers that are generally creating that traffic break, keeping the public at bay, keeping those motorists safe, and preventing anybody from flying past this pursuit. They're also getting ahead of the pursuit and blocking off various entrance ramps and preventing anybody from getting in the crossfire as well. We don't want to see anybody hurt, any innocent bystanders here, and so they have the luxury, because of the slow speeds here, they have the luxury of employing all of those tactics and trying to keep everybody safe. But it's also allowing a lot of other folks who have been watching this pursuit online, giving them the opportunity to come out and try and be part of a viral moment. But as you can see here, that slow speed pursuit is continuing here along the eastbound side of the 10 freeway at La Puente. And as the speed has fluctuated, so has the driving behavior, and so has the behavior of literally the driver behind the wheel. When we were able to get a really good view of him early on in the pursuit, when he was doing ridiculous speeds, I mean like 60, 75 miles per hour on surface streets through Inglewood and up through Crenshaw, he was very animated, clearly very agitated, appeared to be very restless, reaching for something in the glove compartment, reaching under the passenger seat. He almost appeared to be dancing in the driver's seat at some points. And then as we transitioned into the 8 o'clock hour and he got onto the freeway, you started to see a little bit of a different demeanor, not quite as much animation, not quite as much movement, more of a slow speed joyride, if you will. So he seems to be going through an episode that is taking him across the spectrum, and you see LAPD exercising extreme patience with him. We've also seen we've seen him flash his hazard lights, we've seen him turn the windshield wipers on and off, all a part of this charade, whether he's doing it for the enjoyment and the attention, or whether he is in an out-of-body experience. It is really anybody's guess. We just don't know the particulars here, but clearly somebody very unstable behind the wheel, I think it's safe to say that, and somebody who is dangerous when we consider the rap sheet that they believe they are dealing with here, according to LAPD. Right. Like I said, at one point he was doing about 100 miles per hour through Hollywood, and then came the spike strip. But it's important to reiterate, the spike strip didn't come until about 3 hours into the pursuit, 2.5, 3 hours into the pursuit before they finally employed that spike strip tactic, which, by the way, they had plenty of opportunity early on, but the go-ahead wasn't given until much later on. If he tries to speed up now, well, we will see those tires really start to shred and start to come apart on him. But right now, while it was a successful spike attempt, and we now have 3 flat tires that we're dealing with, as long as he's going this slow, it's not exactly inhibiting his driving. He's just able to continue the slow parade down the 10 freeway here. So the spike strip, while it was effective, as long as he's going this speed, really doesn't change the game a whole lot. He can continue this, what I think he is treating as a game with law enforcement for still some time to come, all depending on how much gas he's got left in the tank. As I mentioned a minute ago, these law enforcement officers, LAPD's, I believe, still 77th Division, or maybe other divisions at this point. We've seen participation from Hollywood Division, Newton, Harbor Division. This has really covered the entire city. I would imagine there are still some original officers in the proximity here, but they are running low on fuel. They are being replaced out. Same thing for the helicopters. This is now, I believe, we're on the 3rd helicopter hovering over this pursuit. So they are taking turns refueling as well. That is a luxury that the driver of that car does not have. So he is on borrowed time at this point. He's not expending a large amount of fuel, especially in an economy car like that at these speeds. You know, it's hard to calculate, but suffice it to say, he could probably take this for another couple of hours, I would imagine, depending on how much he started with. That's information that we don't know. Certainly something LAPD was probably hoping he would run out of fuel a few hours ago. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. They had lots of opportunities in Inglewood. He was even navigating the same streets pretty repetitively, at least a couple of big loops on the same streets in Inglewood, but then he kind of started gravitating his way towards the 110 freeway. And as it turns out, based on some of the radio traffic that we've intercepted, it turns out that that may have been closer to home for him, maybe South LA or maybe in the South Bay. But as we look back on that period now, he went straight down the 110 freeway, got off near the Vincent Thomas Bridge in San Pedro, and then came back up. And that's, I think, at the point where he started venturing away from home or away from one of the possible addresses that he resides in, according to the information that we've intercepted. So as we sit here now going eastbound on the 10 freeway, he is getting further and further away from what we believe might be home for him. So that leaves you to wonder, you know, what's going through his mind? How does he envision this ending? And, you know, does he have a destination in mind, or is this all a random joyride at this point? Yeah, and the irony of it is that despite the flat tires, which are a big problem for him and certainly would create a problem if he decides to step on the gas, he's got plenty of freeway to play with here. I mean, they've literally shut down the freeway for him. You have never seen the 10 freeway more empty, even at 11 o'clock at night. The eastbound side of the 10 freeway is literally desolate. They have blocked every entrance ramp. They have shut down traffic behind him, and they are calling in for additional units to assist in that traffic operation. So you're looking at miles and miles of wide open freeway, which we would often anticipate a pursuit driver, you know, to ride it out, enjoy it, and speed up and try and get away. He is not trying to get away, I think is my point. He is really in it for the interaction, the game, the attention. He did have his cell phone with him at various points. At some points, he appeared to be on the cell phone or maybe texting at other points, but he appears to be in communication with somebody or some people, and maybe even relatives who we think LAPD has been in communication with, but that cannot be confirmed. The hope is that if it was indeed the case, that maybe relatives would be able to reach out to him and maybe try and talk some sense into him and get him to give himself up peacefully. That's about an hour ago that we got that information, and up until now we have not seen any change in the behavior here. It's a continuing stop-and-go situation, a stop-and-go pattern where he appears to be toying with those officers right behind him. You get the feeling that he's getting some enjoyment out of that, as opposed to just stepping on the gas pedal and trying to flee. And what's wild about that is that we have seen that same situation playing out, not just where this began in Inglewood, not just where we think he might be from in South LA or the South Bay, but across town there seems to be people coming out of the woodwork from all different corners of the city and now the county to try and catch a glimpse of this, or in some cases, even just cheer him on, like loudly cheer him on, pulling off to the side, not only of side streets, but of the freeway, and literally rallying him to, to keep going. There are other folks that have had the opportunity, because of the length of the pursuit and because of the modern technology and the streaming technology that we've been streaming on all night long on various platforms. He also probably has the radio on, who knows, but this has gone far and wide, and it seems like, while it seems like fun and games at times, it can't be stressed enough how dangerous this could all turn at the drop of a dime. The volatility that's involved here, despite the slow speeds and despite the sideshows, if he gets agitated, if he decides that he is not in a good place, this could get very, very dangerous for everybody involved. And that's why they're trying to get everybody to keep, trying to keep their space, keep the public back, and just go along for this as long as the ride lasts, despite the frustrating nature of it. And I can't stress enough, there are thousands of motorists right now. We can't quite swing it back where we are right now, but the camera I'm talking about, but there are thousands of people stuck on the 10 freeway as we speak for several miles through East LA into the San Gabriel Valley. Traffic is backed up for miles. It's just the latest freeway that we've seen this happen on. It happened on the 110 freeway as he went through downtown. Traffic was backed up all the way to the 105. Same thing on the 101 freeway as people were trying to get home and folks are trying to navigate the freeways on a Tuesday night. It's been very, very frustrating, and that's obviously part of the reason, a small part of the reason, or a big part of the reason I should say, that we've been covering it for 4.5 hours straight. Literally now going on about 4.5 hours. Yeah, as we make our way eastbound, you're right. We're making our way past Baldwin Park, West Covina coming up here. We are getting further and further into the San Gabriel Valley. And I should mention that the 60 freeway and the 210 freeway, if you know somebody, they're wide open. They are free and clear. If you know somebody who might happen to be stuck on the 10 freeway, it's a perfect night to just jump off at any of these exits, go up to the 60 or the 210 freeway. With that said, we've got thousands of people who are just stuck behind this, and as long as he continues on this freeway, if he doesn't, get off of it at some point, it's going to stay this way. It's going to stay clogged for quite some time. So very frustrating for a lot of motorists. I just can't get over the number of people who have lined up along the freeway as we continue to see here, trying to get a picture of it, trying to be a part of this moment. But it is dangerous and certainly not encouraged. Now you see he's continuing this slow pattern of stopping and going. He's got his hazard lights on, windshield wipers going back and forth. Very erratic behavior, no rhyme or reason. LAPD of note, keeping no more than 3 car lengths between them and he, at most right here. So that I find interesting as well. Sometimes we see them give him a little, we see them give suspects a little more space in certain situations, but they are pretty close up behind him, and every time he does come to a stop, you see them ready to execute that felony stop that they are so well trained to do and that we see so very often here. Coming up on the Glendora Avenue exit, which he is bypassing, staying committed to the 10 freeway, and it's just a matter of time. But as I said earlier in our web stream, there's no guarantee that it's going to be a short amount of time. David, you raise a really good point. If he does come to a stop, there is a very real possibility that this could turn into a standoff. And you're right, it could be an extended standoff. And it would not be uncommon in many other situations where we would see them call in for the SWAT team to help them assist in bringing this to an end. Or maybe now that we're in county's jurisdiction, LA Sheriff would send out maybe their Special Enforcement Bureau. However, that question was asked earlier in the pursuit, and the request was denied. They chose not to send out the SWAT team to stand by, and part of that reasoning at the time, and it may very well still be the case, that now that they know what they know about his mental state, that maybe that would not be the best tactic in terms of keeping him calm and relaxed. Now you saw that front left tire come completely off. He's now riding entirely on his aluminum rim. But yeah, I don't even know if he does come to a stop. It'll be interesting to see what type of tactics they will take, whether they will send out a SWAT team or whether they will weather this out some other way. But that's where we're at. And I can guarantee you that that threat is still top of mind hours later on the part of those officers right behind him. They are well aware of what possibly is inside that car, considering the weapons charges and the belief that there was a gun involved in the original crime. So they are treating this very gingerly, as we've been stating, but there's good reason for it, and there's good reason that they are pouring this amount of resources. When you think of the dozens of officers who have been involved in this pursuit, not a normal pursuit, not a typical situation by any means, various jurisdictions. Again, I mentioned several helicopters taking part in this pursuit. There is a desperation to get this person off the road, but they want to do it as peacefully as possible and as safely as possible, both for the safety of the public and, of course, for the well-being of the individual behind the wheel. ICOM. No, in fact, it's a little surprising. I think he's showing a certain amount of endurance here, quite frankly, considering everything that we've all been through in the last 4.5 hours. The fact that he is still participating in this game, and I keep calling it a game because I do feel like he is playing. He is toying with the units behind him, and whether it's for the attention or whether it's because he's getting enjoyment out of it, he is continuing it hours on end of this pattern of stopping and going. Of course, he gets egged on by occasional passerbys, or in some cases, people that have actually pulled over just for the purpose of watching this roll by. He's putting on quite a show, so he's not only getting enjoyment by toying with law enforcement officers, he also seems to be well aware, as you mentioned earlier, of the fact that he is providing some form of entertainment here. So a lot of factors at play when you consider his criminal history, when you consider the information that he may be mentally impaired and going through some type of a manic episode, and then the fact that he is under this kind of pressure with law enforcement on his tail, helicopters flying overhead. As you mentioned, there's a lot of stimulation coming from all different angles. And I mean, how much longer can one person endure that? I mean, he's showing some degree of endurance to be continuing this on for 4.5 hours. As I mentioned earlier, though, it could all change so quickly if he has a bad moment and decides to make the wrong decision. And that's, again, one of the other many reasons we are here covering this, because there is a very real present danger on the freeway this evening, and has been all evening long over the course of this pursuit. And as you mentioned, we now find ourselves on the eastbound side of the 10 freeway here in West Covina.
When you get tired, you lose your want and desire to fight. And perhaps that's enough for him to just give up and say, do what you will. He certainly doesn't seem nearly as active as he did when he first jumped on this pursuit almost 5 hours ago.
Yeah, and it's one thing if it was during the day and there were it was even more of a spectacle. You can imagine what it would be like. But at this late hour, he seems to almost, I mean, it's impossible to get inside of his head, obviously, but perhaps he just is resigned to how this is going to end and is just enjoying his last remaining minutes of freedom. That we see all the time. That would actually not be so uncommon. So, he's using every last drop of gas. He's using the remainder of his energy and enjoying his last few minutes of freedom in playing this game, which, while it's been frustrating for the entire city this evening, it's still a game to him, I think. And as you see us pull away, we're actually going to start making our way over to the airport for another refuel. This is now going to be our second refuel of the evening. It's been a long night of refueling, not only for us, but as I mentioned earlier, for all of those ground units, the various agencies who have swapped out, handed off. Same thing for the helicopters flying overhead. It is a little bit mind-boggling when you look at a situation like this. Granted, we're somewhat accustomed to this type of situation here in Los Angeles, but the amount of resources that go into this type of a spectacle, and it's obviously for a good reason. As we've been saying, there is a very real danger to the public here, and hopefully it ends as safely as it's been progressing here in the last several hours. Hopefully, when it's all said and done, nobody gets hurt, David.
Right. Okay, so you've got to move out of there and safely refuel. Boy, this guy's just starting to get a little bit squirrely too, right at that moment. But we'll be back. Chris, you've done a great job today. It's been a long night. Good luck refueling. Stay safe, and then we'll have updates for you, for the folks out there who are watching this as soon as we get it. Thank you all for joining us.